king of German mercenaries.
Chapter 229 Spring plowing. Lanet couldn't make a decision himself, so he sent one of his men and 3 horses to return to Cleaver City to ask John II for instructions. Soon, John II replied that he agreed to the deal. As a result, Marin got 22 good middle-level officers, and John II got a large number of craftsmen. It can be said that it was a win-win situation. Even on the surface, John II made some money. When the personnel exchange started, it was already March, and the spring plowing in East Frisia had officially begun. Many serfs were not used to the new curved plow pulled by a single horse in the first few days. But after a few days, everyone got used to this labor-saving and easy-to-use curved plow. However, in order to serve these horses, Marin imported a lot of oats and eggs to replenish nutrition for these hard-working draft horses. Even because they sweat a lot, the horses need to replenish salt. Therefore, some salt is added to the draft horse feed. In order to provide thousands of draft horses across the country, Marin had to organize the import of baskets of eggs, so much so that Marin even planned to start a chicken farming business. Of course, this would have to wait until the spring plowing was over. In this era, it is not easy to scale up the chicken farming business because of the difficulty in supplying feed. Common people usually raise chickens in a free-range manner, letting the chickens find insects to eat on their own. Want to eat grain? That's too extravagant. People don't even have enough to eat. In this era, only China, where agriculture is developed in grain is very cheap, dares to feed chickens with grain. In Europe at that time, not only chickens were raised in the wild, but also pigs. It was not that Europeans did not know that pigs raised in pens could be fatter, but they had to be fed grain. Food was very expensive in Europe, and the black bread people ate was mixed with a lot of wild vegetables, sawdust, and even stones. How could there be extra food to feed pigs? Even wheat bran was mixed in the black bread eaten by ordinary people. Only the black bread eaten by the nobles had the wheat bran separated. However, the farmland under Marin's name can increase production dramatically because of the use of new fertilizers, so it is possible to use some of the shriveled grain to feed sheep, chickens, ducks and pigs. However, doing so will definitely be a loss. You know, how high is the price of wheat? How high is the price of meat? Feeding pigs and chickens with grain will definitely be a loss. Therefore, it is better to feed pigs with nutritious alfalfa. As for raising chickens, Marin wondered whether he should raise chickens with maggots. According to the online novels he read in his previous life, maggots are very nutritious, but they need rotten meat as a culture medium. But this is not a problem. The price of meat in Europe is relatively cheaper than in China. Raising chickens with maggots in Europe is more cost-effective. Of course, raising maggots is not that simple. First of all, maggots are the larvae of flies and need to be controlled. The chickens must eat them before the maggots grow into flies, so as to prevent them from becoming flies and harming the environment. In addition, since maggots are raised on rotten meat, they are prone to the production of various pathogens. Therefore, the person responsible for feeding the maggots must be fully armed, preferably wearing a mask, and also pay attention to using lime for disinfection. Otherwise, if the maggots develop diseases, it will be a big deal. Of course, these issues are not what Marin is considering at the moment. What he is most concerned about now is the spring plowing problem. Because there are so many horses that need to be raised in the country, Marin specially planned 5,000 ugrams of arable land to grow oats to supply the feed needs of the domestic horses. Although 5,000 uglams is equivalent to 60,000 mu of land, which can harvest tens of millions of kilograms of oats, these horses are all heavy European horses. Most of the local horses are tall and strong, with shoulder heights of more than 1.6 meters. They are the ancestors of the later famous Frisian horses and Oldenburg horses. Being tall and strong, they naturally eat a lot. A horse's feed can reach dozens of kilograms a day. If some luxurious nobles feed their horses with oats every day, a horse would consume tens of thousands of kilograms of oats every year. More than 10 million kilograms is only enough to feed 1,000 horses. Of course, for ordinary people raising horses, oats account for a very small proportion of feed. Especially for draft horses, oats only account for a small proportion. Only when plowing the fields, when the physical exertion is great, will they be fed more oats. Even the knights' war horses were often fed oats, but they were mixed with a lot of other cheap feeds and tender grass. Otherwise, ordinary knight families could not afford to feed them all oats every meal. The more than 10 million kilograms of oats produced by the 5,000 ugram oat fields, combined with alfalfa, are considered high quality even for war horses. For this reason, Marin also decided to continue to use draft horses to simply plow some grasslands after the spring plowing to facilitate the planting of alfalfa. Last autumn, the Wadden Islands harvested a lot of alfalfa seeds, which could be planted on a very large area. According to Marin's plan, a horse farm was specially planned on the open space near the city of Auric, where alfalfa was planted as the main fodder for horses. The efficiency of the curved plow is not to be underestimated. In the past, because the light plow was not effective, and the Saxon heavy plow required several horses to pull it together, the efficiency of spring plowing was very low. Usually, spring plowing began in early March and lasted until mid to late April. But after the introduction of the curved plow, the plow that originally required 5 horses to be pulled could now be pulled by 1 horse, and the farming effect was almost the same. This led to the manors that originally used the Saxon heavy plow to increase their farming efficiency several times. Most of the noble estates in Lisle County that were confiscated by Marin used Saxon heavy plows and a large number of draft horses. After using the curved plow, the efficiency was greatly improved. Before the end of March, all the 60,000 ugrams of arable land under Marin's name had completed spring plowing. The estates of other families also basically completed or were close to the end. At the same time, good news came from the Wadden Islands. The spring plowing of tens of thousands of ugrams of cultivated land on the islands was also completed. Many of the thousands of draft horses that Marin seized from France were left on the Wadden Islands for use as draft power. However, in the fall, when the large Polish herd arrived in Silesia, Marin planned to buy thousands of cattle to replace the draft horses on a large scale. At that time, the high-quality French horses in the Wadden Islands would be arranged to the horse farm in Auric to professionally breed excellent ponies. After the land was plowed, Marin sent people to distribute the black fertilizer blocks produced by several fertilizer processing plants to various manors, and arranged for his serfs to spread them on the fields. As for what this black thing with a strange smell was, Marin didn't explain a word, nor did he want to explain. Moreover, the people responsible for fertilizing were all processing plant employees sent by Marin to deliver fertilizers. They were all Marin's own serfs, who had been trained in confidentiality and would never talk nonsense. Even the manors under Marin's command and the manors of local nobles who surrendered to Marin were fertilized by people sent by Marin. The fertilizer factory employees sent by Marin all wore masks and used engineer shovels to evenly spread cartloads, wheelbarrows, of fertilizer blocks onto the plowed fields. Then they immediately finished work and returned home without staying at the manors for meals or saying a word to those people. This was Marin's special request. If they didn't talk, there would be no chance of leaking secrets. The same goes for eating. If these people stayed in those manors to eat and drink some wine. Many people are normal before drinking, but talkative after drinking. If you accidentally let your secrets out, it will be bad. Therefore, Marin told the employees of the fertilizer factory not to talk to outsiders or stay in the local area for meals. After killing the fertilizer, they would go directly to the fertilizer factory to eat their work meals. During the spring plowing period, Marin also gave extra meals to the fertilizer factory workers because he knew they worked hard. From time to time, he also cooked a few pots of braised pork, which was better than eating at those manors. You know, the black bread eaten by the serfs in the manor was so thick that you could use it as a brick to hit someone. But the black bread eaten by the fertilizer factory employees was also mixed with other ingredients, but it was never mixed with stones, sawdust and other non-food items. It was just mixed with some wild vegetables and wheat bran, which could be considered normal food, and was similar to the black bread eaten by the rich people in the countryside. Although Marin raised 3,000 serfs in several fertilizer processing plants, the expenses were relatively high. However, as long as the secret of the fertilizer was kept, what was the cost? The yield per moo increased by several hundred kilograms, and the income did not increase too much. As for Marin's keeping the fertilizer secret, his subordinates, such as Schwartz and Frunsberg, who knew about it, were very supportive and kept it a secret, because doing so would allow them to maintain their agricultural technology advantages to the greatest extent possible. You know, although they are not as rich as Marin, they also have more than 1,000 ugrams of arable land. Other people's rye yields more than 100 pounds per acre, while theirs yields hundreds of pounds per acre. That feeling is so great. When the last truckload of fertilizer was spread on the ground by the fertilizer factory employees, Marin knew that his wedding should begin. Chapter 230, Future father-in-law comes to the door. As soon as the spring plowing was over, the top priority of the entire East Frisian county was Marin's marriage. So, the whole country took action. In fact, old Hoffman and Lady Mary were very dissatisfied with Marin's plan to marry Angela, that knight's daughter. Because, in their opinion, Marin was now the earl of the earldom, and the object of the marriage was also the princess of a vassal. However, since Marin has not been widely recognized yet, it is difficult for him to marry a princess. However, Marin is only 20 years old now, so he doesn't need to get married so early. Many nobles get married at around 30 years old. With such conditions, Marin can wait for other countries to gradually recognize him, and then choose a princess from a vassal state to marry. According to common sense, the idea of the old Hoffman couple is very correct. However, Marin knows that although Angela, whom he has chosen now, is not conspicuous, she will be of the greatest help to him in the future. Because the king and the princes have their own sons, they may not help their sons-in-law too much. But the future Pope Julius II is different. He has no illegitimate children, only Angela and Felice, two illegitimate daughters. Moreover, Felice is not liked by Julius II. But even so, after Julius II became pope, he helped Felice remarry the son of a duke and helped his son-in-law successfully become the new duke. Of course, that was because in history, Julius II's first two daughters died, leaving only Felice as the only child, so he had to help her even if he didn't like her. However, Angela told Marin that her father loved her the most and didn't like her sister because her sister was not as pretty, cute, and obedient as her. Although Marin had heard Angela talk about family matters before, he didn't pay attention to the specific details. Now that I think about it, Angela's sister is the famous Felice. Julius II likes Angela the most, and he has no son. So, when he becomes the pope, he will naturally spare no effort to help his son-in-law. Therefore, the benefits of marrying Angela are very great. Moreover, Angela herself is also a well-behaved, beautiful, and lovely little beauty, and Marin will not suffer any loss if he marries her. However, because Julius II is still a wanted villain by the Vatican, in order not to provoke the Vatican, Marin did not tell his family about Angela's true identity, but insisted on marrying her. Although the old Hoffman couple were unhappy, they had no choice. Who told the son to be so much stronger than the father? At present, Marin's control over East Frisia is very thorough. All the oppositions were killed. Therefore, Marin's words are the law in East Frisia. Others respect old Hoffman and Mrs. Mary only because they are Marin's parents. Therefore, Marin insisted on doing something, and the couple had no way to stop him. Moreover, to be honest, Lady Mary actually liked Angela very much. What she objected to was only Angela's identity, not Angela as a person. Therefore, when Marin insisted, the couple had no choice but to agree. Anyway, Angela was from a knight family, not a commoner, and her marriage with Marin was not a marriage between the nobles and the commoners. Of course, in Europe, people from knight families were sometimes considered commoners. The marriage between a noble and a knight's daughter was sometimes considered a normal marriage, but many people also considered it a marriage between the noble and the common people. In order to eliminate this hidden danger, Marin simply granted the old knight Nelson the title of lifetime baron. However, this is a special baronial title because it is not hereditary. The so-called lifetime means a lifetime, there is no second generation. As for Nelson the elder's son, Louis, he will become a hereditary knight, and his descendants can also inherit the title of knight. After all, in Europe, the baron is very precious and is generally not granted easily. This time, Marin made an exception and granted old Nelson the title of lifetime baronet, just to raise Angela's worth, and stipulated in the document that after old Nelson's death, his son would inherit the title by a lower rank. To be honest, if old Nelson was really Marin's father-in-law, Louis might not need to be demoted in the future. However, old Nelson was just a fake father-in-law, not a real one. If he was really given a hereditary baronet, Marin would be at a loss. Therefore, the fake brother-in-law Louis could only be a hereditary knight to begin with. But even so, the Nelson family made a fortune. Old Nelson did not have to do anything to become a baron. Although Louis inherited the title at a lower level, he also made a fortune. Because, although the title he inherited was only a knight, it could be inherited and was much more valuable than an ordinary knight. Moreover, the titles of other soldiers were earned by fighting hard. But their family was just lucky to have a rich family. When everyone knew that Marin had promoted old Nelson to a noble title, they were speechless. After all, Marin was now an earl, and it was indeed inappropriate to marry a knight's daughter. Marin's marriage to a baron's daughter was much better. Moreover, old Nelson's baronet could not be inherited, which made everyone very accepting and felt that Marin was very particular about his work. As for Louis, the hereditary knight, everyone had nothing to say, because he had a beautiful sister who fascinated the earl. I heard that Marin had scheduled his wedding for April 18th, sweat. Marin is obsessed with numbers, he likes the number 18 very much, and the ministers began to prepare gifts. People like Schwartz, who were originally servants, took the initiative to send their families to the palace to help. He is now a baronet, and his family has moved into his baronial mansion in Auric, and the whole family is very proud. But not only Schwartz, but also his family are very grateful to the Lord Marin. Therefore, for Marin's wedding, Schwartz simply asked his family to help. Marin's 5 attendants, Schwartz, Kahn, Saul, Garland and Tara, as well as Kohler who was in charge of the accounts, are now all rich. Schwartz and Kahn, one because of his ability and education, the other because of his bravery and great military exploits, were both made baronets. Kohler was also a court baron because he was a quartermaster and had military merits, and he helped Marin do many shady things. As for the other 3, Saul became a hereditary knight, and he was only one step away from being a baron. As long as he has merits next time, he will be a baron for sure. As for Garland and Tara, due to their limited abilities, they are currently only knights of the 3rd generation. There is nothing they can do about it. In the previous siege, the 2 of them were guarding Marin and did not get a chance to show their abilities. Although they are all his own people and Marin trusts them very much, Marin needs to be fair. Therefore, he only conferred titles on them as knights of the 3rd generation. He can only wait and find a chance to confer them as hereditary knights in the future. But in terms of their abilities, a hereditary knight is the top. To become a baron, one must have outstanding military exploits. But these 2 are good at being bodyguards, but they are not good at commanding an army. Just as the whole country of East Frisia was decorating its doors with lanterns and flowers, preparing to welcome Marin's wedding, a group of people arrived by land from the southwest. This group of people came from Paris, France, and the leader was none other than the legendary Archbishop Rovere, the future Pope Julius II. The group of people following him were mainly Archbishop Rovere's clansmen and former confidants of the Vatican. Since he wrote back to his daughter Angela last time, Archbishop Rovere has been waiting for her to write again. As long as she responds, he plans to bring her to Paris and arrange for her to marry the son of the earl he favors. However, he had not received any letter from his daughter for more than 2 months. So he decided not to wait any longer and planned to bring people to East Frisia to ask for his daughter. Anyway, even if his daughter replied to his letter and agreed, he would still go to pick her up. However, in order to force Marin to surrender, Archbishop Rovere specially found the count and obtained the official French diplomatic documents, intending to use the name of France to pressure Marin and force him to hand over the person. At first, Archbishop Rovere led his men to attack Emden. Unfortunately, Marin had already moved the capital. So Archbishop Rovere hurried to Auric. On the way, he heard that Marin was going to marry a girl named Hannah on April 18. Archbishop Rovere concluded that this Hannah might be his daughter. In order to get his daughter back, Archbishop Rovere and his party rushed non-stop and arrived in Auric in the afternoon of the 17th. They took out the French diplomatic documents and arrogantly broke into Marin's palace, with a bad face. Fortunately, Angela was getting married and was not suitable to live in the palace, so she temporarily moved to a small castle outside the city to wait for Marin to come and pick her up. Otherwise, she might have been run into by Archbishop Rovere. When Marin learned that Archbishop Rovere had come to visit him personally and had a bad attitude, his face changed. Although Archbishop Rovere did not reveal his identity, Marin learned that this man was named Giuliano and came from Paris with French diplomatic documents, so he guessed that this was his future father-in-law. But what makes Marin depressed is that his future father-in-law is here with bad intentions, and seems to be trying to stop him from marrying Angela. What bad luck! I'm about to get married, but my future father-in-law comes knocking on my door. Chapter 231, House Arrest for Father-in-law. Marin was also caught off guard by Archbishop Rovere's personal visit. Originally, in his opinion, Archbishop Rovere would be able to become the Pope in the future, so he would definitely be very patient. As long as Marin and Angela got married, everything would be easy. What he didn't expect was that Archbishop Rovere didn't even wait and came to his house in person. Moreover, he brought the French diplomatic documents. Although the French and Marin had a feud, it was left by the previous king, Charles VIII. Now, with the death of Charles VIII, the feud between Marin and the French has dissipated more than half, leaving only personal feuds with some French soldiers and the families. After all, the new king, Louis XII, is not the son of Charles VIII, but only a relative, so there is no need to help Charles VIII to avenge. However, if Marin dared not to give face to Archbishop Rovere, who brought diplomatic documents from the era of the new French monarch, it would be equivalent to offending France again and fighting the French to death. It would even give the French an excuse to publicly deal with Marin. Therefore, Marin felt a great headache. However, he would never give up the opportunity to marry Angela. He had been planning for so long, it was impossible for him to stop just because of a letter from the French. But the problem is that if he wants to rise in the future and participate in the German hegemony, he must get the support of his father-in-law who will become the Pope in the future. However, now that his father-in-law has come to the door and wants to stop him from marrying Angela, Marin is very depressed. Then, it would be very troublesome to solve this matter. Even if Marin did not give the French face and forced the marriage, the consequences of doing so would be very serious. Not to mention the face of a superpower like France, it would also provoke the anger of the future pope. If I anger my future father-in-law, and he becomes the pope and refuses to help me because he doesn't like me, then all my efforts will be in vain. But if Marin gave up Angela like this, he would be working in vain and making things easier for others. From now on, the pope's son-in-law would become another French guy. The resources of the Holy See would also tend to that guy. Marin decided to have a good talk with his future father-in-law, so he received Archbishop Rovere in the living room of the palace. But unexpectedly, Archbishop Rovere was not willing to talk to him at all, and did not want to listen to what Marin said, but only wanted to take his daughter away. After talking for a long time, Archbishop Rovere didn't listen to a word. Finally, Marin got angry. "Come here, take these distinguished guests to the villa in the east of the city to stay for 2 days. Remember to send enough people to protect the guests' safety." Marin was furious and decided to put Archbishop Rovere and his entourage under house arrest for 2 days. He would release them after the wedding was over. Count Marin, don't make a mistake. Offending the powerful France will not end well. Archbishop Rovere also knows German. He could tell at once that Marin was giving orders to his soldiers in German. Before, Marin and Archbishop Rovere had been arguing in Latin the whole time, which was very high class. The attendants beside them were all civilians who had never learned Latin and did not understand what they were saying. Therefore, the communication between the two was a bit unscrupulous. But now Marin doesn't want to quarrel anymore, he just wants to get married quietly. As for the father-in-law who strongly opposes, he will be locked up for 2 days first. Your Excellency Archbishop Rovere, do you think King Louis XII of France would care about such a trivial matter? I'm afraid you got this document through connections. At least, I didn't see the signature of His Majesty Louis XII. Marin was relieved after reading the diplomatic document. At least, it was not a document signed by Louis XII himself. Even if he refused, it would not be considered an offense to Louis XII. Marin felt no pressure to offend a French minister. How do you know my real identity? Did Angela tell you? Archbishop Rovere was a little shocked. From the beginning to the end, he communicated with Marin in the name of the French envoy Giuliano. Moreover, although he is Archbishop Rovere. However, to the outside world, he generally does not use his real name and does not wear bishop's robes. Because he is still wanted by the Holy See of Alexander VI. Only in France, he dares to use his real name and exchange it for the archbishop's robe. Because the French can ignore Alexander VI. As long as he leaves France, he will not use his real name and change into ordinary aristocratic clothes, so as not to be tied up by some blind man and sent to Rome to seek credit and reward. Moreover, Archbishop Rovere had long ago warned Angela and Felice not to tell anyone that their father was Archbishop Rovere. He also believed that his smartest and most obedient second daughter would not easily reveal her identity. However, Marin revealed his true identity. This made him wonder if Angela accidentally revealed his identity to Marin. Angela didn't tell me, but I have a wide range of sources and connections in Italy. Not only do I know that Angela is your daughter, I also know that you have another daughter named Felice. Then do you know where Felice is? Archbishop Rovere looked at Marin with hope. If Angela is really useless, it would be a good idea to use Felice for marriage. Anyway, as long as one of his daughters can marry a French noble, it will be enough. And Angela marrying Marin, the ruler of a country, is not a loss. I only know a rough outline. It seems that your little daughter Felice and her mother are hiding in the countryside of Genoa. It is said that Felice has married a small landowner in the countryside of Genoa who is not a noble. What? She's only 15 years old, and she's married so early. And she's marrying a commoner? Archbishop Rovere jumped up in anger. Not only would his daughter not be able to obtain the effect of marriage alliance, but he would also be embarrassed. After all, he was the nephew of the former pope, and had controlled the Vatican for many years. He never expected that one of his daughters would marry a countryman. It was really shameful. Don't you think about it? The mother and daughter were running for their lives. It is said that they had nowhere else to go and no money. Felice had no choice but to marry the son of a small country landlord in exchange for his shelter. How could this be? How could this be? My daughter couldn't even marry a nobleman. You must be lying to me, right? Archbishop Rovere was a little out of control. I really didn't lie to you. You are my future father-in-law. How dare I lie to you? Marin shrugged and said indifferently. So, Lucrezia is also with Felice. Lucrezia is the mistress of Archbishop Rovere and the mother of Angela and Felice. Yes. Then why don't you bring them to East Frisia as well? Archbishop Rovere was a little sad. He was once a powerful figure in the church, but he didn't expect that his mistress and little daughter would be so poor that they needed to be taken in by a small country landlord. I didn't find out the details, I just heard some general information. At that time, I was being hunted by the Borgia family with Angela, so I had to flee Italy quickly. How could I go to Genoa to investigate? Moreover, Ms. Felice and Ms. Lucrezia must have changed their identities for safety, so it would be very difficult to find them. In fact, Marin had only seen related anecdotes on the internet in later generations, but he had never sent anyone to Genoa to look for them in reality. Are you sure Felice is married? About that. According to the online records of her previous life, Felice got married around 1498. Now it's 1499, so she must have been married. Then give me Angela back. I only have one unmarried daughter. Give me my daughter back. Archbishop Rovere suddenly jumped up and tried to grab Marin's sleeves. The guards beside him saw this and wanted to beat Archbishop Rovere, who was a little out of control. But Marin waved his hand and stopped the guards from interfering. He would have to rely on this father-in-law in the future, so he couldn't really beat him. So, Marin grabbed Archbishop Rovere's hands to prevent him from attacking him. Marin was a knight, and he was still young. Although he was no match for beasts like Adler and Conn, he had no problem controlling an old man in his 50s like Archbishop Rovere. Then, Marindo called some people, carried Archbishop Rovere and his entourage, and took them to a villa in the east of the city for house arrest. That villa was where Marin's family temporarily lived when the Auric Palace was renovated. It had complete facilities. Now that Marin's family had moved into the palace, the villa was empty, and it was just right for him to imprison his father-in-law. Marin repeatedly warned the guards, fearing that they might resort to violence. Although he was under house arrest, he still had to receive all the proper courtesy. He also served the best food, all delicious Chinese food. In short, as long as Archbishop Rovere was not allowed to disturb his wedding, it would be fine. In other aspects, Marin tried his best to give his father-in-law the highest courtesy.